The School of Economic Science began in 1937 and grew in the shadow of the Industrial Depression and World War II. Driven by the need to understand and correct the extreme economic suffering and poverty of the time, Leon MacLaren, a barrister, started the School of Economic Science. It was based on the economic ideas of land taxation that his father, Andrew MacLaren, had gained from the American writer Henry George. This was the first critical step in the school's search for truth and justice for all. But after the war, Leon MacLaren came to believe that economics alone could not correct the problems of the time. In the early 1950s, a philosophy course based on Plato was added to the economics program. The enrollment was high at 150 students, and the following year, numbers swelled to 250.
It became very clear to me that there was such a thing as truth, and there was such a thing as justice, and that they could be found, and being found, could be taught.
The intention was strong, but the content was limited. In 1953, Mr. MacLaren was introduced to Dr. Francis Rolls and the Study Society in London. There he heard the teachings of Peter Ouspensky, a Russian journalist and philosopher, and his teacher, George Gurdjieff. They believed that man and the universe were highly mechanical. Their search focused on the practical study of methods to wake man up and become conscious of their true potential. They developed a simple stilling practice of self-remembering by putting your full attention on the senses. Today, that method is known as mindfulness. Before Ouspensky died in 1947, he was of the conviction that the system was essentially incomplete. Dr. Francis Rolls continued Ouspensky's work, and under his guidance, the Study Society continued developing the disciplines of the Fourth Way.
Discipline was needed to go beyond the mechanical workings of the mind and the ego. Ordinary people remaining engaged in life worked on integrating the intellectual, emotional, and physical intelligence by giving complete attention to the task at hand. Concentrated attention was proving to be key to the experience of peace and happiness.
Dr. Rolls had been instructed by Ouspensky to search for the source of the system. In 1960, he and Leon MacLaren met Maharishi Mahesh Yogi in London and recognized the method of mantra meditation as the missing and critical part of awakening the creative and spiritual aspects of what it meant to be human.
The Maharishi had a huge effect in London, and in 1961 the school helped organise a meeting at the Royal Albert Hall where he spoke to 5,000 people.
My vision in the world is spiritual regeneration. To regenerate every man everywhere into the values of spirit.
As the spread of meditation in the West took place, the Beatles became his most famous supporters.
In 1961, the Maharishi invited Dr. Rolls to India to perfect the meditation practice. On that trip, he was introduced to Sri Shantananda Saraswati, the head of an ancient tradition in northern India founded by a wise man, Shankara. It was on hearing this ancient teaching of Advaita, the philosophy of non-duality, that he became convinced that he had found a source of true knowledge. He then introduced Mr. MacLaren to the Shankaracharya, and a 30-year relationship of meetings and conversations began.
Through his own study and investigation, Mr. MacLaren found this treasure house of wisdom from the Shankaracharya to be both universal and practical. Since the knowledge was universal, Mr. MacLaren found parallels with great thinkers from the Western tradition.
The philosophy course that Mr. MacLaren developed as a result of these conversations is a 12-week program of evening lectures based on a question and answer format. You absorb what is presented, question, apply, and then discuss what the understanding is in relation to specific examples in your own life. Mr. MacLaren himself reflected on these truths and observed the barriers the mind presented. In discussing this with the Shankaracharya, new insights arose and the material was continually revised to support the pursuit of truth and the ongoing philosophical journey for the members of the school. In order to stay in touch with the teaching, many students who attended the courses in London returned home and started schools in their own cities and towns.
The aim is truth. And truth, as we now know, is beyond creation. It is the self of every living creature. And that is the aim. That is what it's all about.